Hey, everybody, what's up? Welcome into Best on the Board, presented by BetMGM here at The Athletic. It is a Monday. It is January 24th. We are coming off maybe the greatest weekend any of us has ever seen for playoff football. 4 games that were all won on walk-off scores, 3 field goals, and then to cap it all off, Bills and Chiefs back and forth, overtime. Travis Kelce, just a ridiculous game, capping a ridiculous weekend and sending us forward into a conference championship weekend 6 days away. Michael Beller and Andrew DeWitt here with you on this episode of Best on the Board to take a look at those conference championship games. But first, DeWitt, we would be remiss if we did not at least take a little look back at this weekend that we just had. Just ridiculous from start to finish.
Yeah, it was awesome. I mean, as disappointing as Wild Card Weekend was, that and kind of all 6 games kind of fit into that bill. All 4 games were just incredible. And, you know, I did a little trip with my girlfriend on Saturday morning because I told her, I was like, this is the last big football weekend. I'm going to watch all 4 games. Got back at halftime of the Titans game, and I literally just watched all 4 games. It was just great. I mean, there were some blunders and coaching bad decisions and great coaching decisions and bad special teams and great quarterback play. And I was looking at some of the social media this morning, like the game scores from Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. They literally put up 2 of the best games in NFL history, even not including playoffs, just like regular season as well. And it's just insane at, you know, how that game ended. And I won't even get into the overtime debate, but it was fine. I mean, it was great football all around, great gambling all around. I mean, if some people grabbed like the Bucks yesterday were like 6-1, 7-1 at one point, like late in the mid-third quarter when I looked. And then the Chiefs, like they're 16-1 with 13 seconds left. That was just insane. I mean, it was just great football weekend all around.
It really was. And something that stood out to me about it was the fact that we had 4 they were all close games. They were all competitive games, obviously, but they were incredibly different styles. From, you know, the Bengals and Titans going back and forth trading field goals to the Bills and the Chiefs going back and forth trading touchdowns to super low scoring defense dominated with the 49ers and Packers to totally offense and Chiefs and Bills. It was just a lot of fun. You had the crazy comeback with the Buccaneers getting back in the game against the Rams. Just really, it's like we checked every single box of how can you make a competitive football game. And those 4 games really covered all the bases for us. And so just a super fun weekend. Obviously, a little bit more fun if you came out ahead in gambling or if you came out ahead in terms of being a Bengals or a Chiefs or a 49ers or a Rams fan, and your team is one of 4 still left remaining to win this year's Super Bowl. But just incredible football all around, and that has us very excited for the championship week that we have ahead of us. So let's get down to brass tacks here, DeWitt. Let's take a quick early look at these 2 games. We will start with the AFC matchup on BetMGM. The Chiefs are 7.5-point favorites as you and I sit here and talk about this on Monday morning. Bengals getting the 7.5 on the road against a team they just beat at home a couple of weeks ago. 54.5 the total on this one. That was one that easily surpassed 54.5 when the Bengals and Chiefs got together, a 34-31 Bengals victory in that game. The Bengals had to come back from multiple score deficits in that, and they did so very well. Joe Burrow really planting his flag as one of the AFC superstar quarterbacks for years to come in that game. Even though he was already building his way toward it, we knew he could be that guy. It was that game that really shined a light on this Bengals team and this Bengals offense, and it's been really no looking back for them ever since that one that clinched the AFC North for them. So this should be a fun one. I'm expecting this to be a good game. And my early lean, haven't placed any bets yet, no tickets yet. My early lean is to take the Bengals and the points.
Yeah, I think I would be surprised if this doesn't come down to 7 before the kickoff. I just kind of think it's going to lean that way. The other thing is in the look aheads, you know, Vegas typically provides a spread, especially once the Bengals won on Saturday night. They were kind of like look ahead lines, and those lines were originally 6.5. And then this quickly got bet up to 7. It opened at 7, and then it got quickly bet up to 7.5. The total started at 50.5 last night, and I got to bet in really quick on that. I knew that was just in the shoot up, so it immediately shot up. I think it might go higher, to be honest. I think this total might go a little bit higher if you're – it's the one thing I will say in that Bengals-Chiefs game the first time, there were a lot of penalties.
Yeah.
And that extended a lot of drives, especially on the Bengals side. Especially like the ending of the game, that was the crazy one where they had the ball at 1st and goal with like more than 2 minutes left, and the penalties kind of let them kill the clock and kick the field goal. It was a very strange ending, and I'm going to go back and rewatch that game later this week. But I think that was a big part of it, was like how many penalties there were in that game. So that'll be interesting because the refs have definitely swallowed their whistles, in this. We haven't seen any pass interference calls. We haven't seen any false start calls when there definitely could have been some false start calls this weekend on shotgun snaps. It's just been interesting to see how the refs have kind of handled it. I think there was maybe one holding call in that Bills-Chiefs game last night with both defenses getting after the quarterbacks a lot. So it's just interesting to see how they're calling it. But that if they're not going to call penalties, that can typically help the over a little bit. So it's just interesting to see how this total goes. I don't see it go like dropping to 6.5. Do you?
I don't. I mean, there would have to be a ton of money and like money from the right sources coming in on the Bengals for it to drop that much. I do think I wouldn't be surprised to see this settle at 7, by end of day Tuesday, and just have it live there for the rest of the week. That's where it feels fair on both sides too, right? Chiefs at home, coming off that performance they're coming off. I mean, the Bengals have done well to get themselves here, but it's not like they have been this just, total explosive offense in either of their wins over the Raiders or the Titans. And, we could have very easily been talking about them as a team that went home after that game against the Raiders, and certainly after the game against the Titans as well. Who knows how that game unfolds if Mike Vrabel just takes the PAT instead of the 2-pointer early in that game. Looks totally different because we're talking about the Titans playing with a lead, something they never had in that entire game against the Bengals. So it looks a little bit different. I think it's 7 feels like a fair spot for me for this to come in at. And again, I lean toward the Bengals. I think this is too high on the total. Not saying I'm going to come in and smash the under, but it just feels a little bit too high. You mentioned the fact that we had the Bengals in that 34-31 win get a lot of penalty luck and a lot of drives extended with penalties. And they've just been a team that, if you go and look back over their full season, they're not this consistent over team the way that the Chiefs and the Bills are. They're just not that style of team. They can play that way, but they're not a team that is an over machine in such a way that you would want both teams to be if you're going to say that this game is going to get to 55. Not saying it can't, not saying it won't, not saying that I would strongly advise people to not bet the over. For me, unless something dramatically changes in this number over the next 6 days, the total is going to be a pretty easy stay away. I don't fully trust the Bengals offense to be able to keep things going in this game the way that we saw Josh Allen and company do last night.
And I think it's key to point out, and this comes up in the 49ers-Rams game. These teams just played this month. Mm-hmm. So these teams are familiar with each other. It's not like it's a week 1 or a week 2 matchup where a lot of things have changed, schemes have changed. Like, these teams are kind of set where they are. And I think that's the good side. I think on a Thursday I did Bengals best bet 8-1 to win the AFC. So I have that ticket. So I am going to hedge back on that a little bit just to lock up a little bit of money. Yeah. But just because I don't think I'm not a fan of the Bengals winning this game outright, just at Arrowhead and everything they have going for them. But I mean, I think one thing I would say that maybe they don't want to take the number to 7 is because they don't want any, it doesn't want to be a push on both sides. Right. That's not a win for the gamblers, Vegas. They don't win any money. Like, there's going to be so much money riding on this game that you don't want it to be a push. So
they're going to stake a position. You're definitely right about that. The books are going to stake a position. If this is something that week 5, maybe they would have made just a 7-point line and lived with it with 15 other games going on and all that good stuff. Like, they're definitely going to stake a position and ultimately push it down to 6.5 or 7.5. And that'll let you know how the books feel about this game, assuming that we're right about that and it stays in there. It'll be interesting to see in this one. And it bears a rewatch in Chiefs-Bengals 1. How much of what the Titans did to the Bengals offense, the Chiefs are going to be able to bring also. We know they can get after the quarterback. We know that that's something that that front seven is capable of doing, but they're not the Titans front seven. They just don't have that ability. They just don't, they don't have that individual personnel. So it'll be interesting to see because that's obviously very clearly how you get after this Bengals team. I mean, that was starkly made clear in the game against the Titans. Remarkable that Joe Burrow takes 9 sacks and the Bengals still win that game. So I think that maybe is the fulcrum on which this game is ultimately decided, is just how much pressure can the Chiefs get with consistency against Joe Burrow, because even though I don't love this game getting over 54.5, you probably need at a minimum 24 to feel like this is like you've played your way to a winnable score at the right 24-20, 24-23, 27-24. Like, I could see that being the window in which this game is played and won. And so if the Chiefs are able to generate that sort of pressure on Joe Burrow, at least something similar to what the Titans did, it could be very tough sledding for the Bengals in this game.
Yeah, and remember, Tyrann Mathieu picked up a concussion early in the game yesterday. Travius Ward has some. I just butchered his first name. I apologize, but he's had some injuries and he's been questionable. He's questionable coming in the game last night. Josh Allen tanked him in the fourth quarter, ran him over, and he came out for a few plays. He's playing through it, but he's not 100%, and he's probably one of their. I mean, he's a really solid corner. So I think it's definitely a weakness for the Chiefs as their secondary, but I think they can get after the quarterback, and that's like if Chris Jones has a really good game, and that's like if he's getting after the quarterback, like the Chiefs can get to Burrow. It's just how much do they want to? Because yesterday they weren't necessarily particularly coming after Allen because they were so afraid of him taking off and running all over the field. So
Bengals seemed incredibly reluctant to change what they wanted to do offensively too. They really weren't. I expected at some point in that game against the Titans to see them check to a lot of quick passes, and they started to. Burrow was taking a lot of plays over the middle to CJ Uzomah and Joe Mixon for 6 yards here, 7 yards there. But we didn't see a ton of it. And I thought especially early in the game they had that screen they popped to Jamar Chase that he turned into a 55-yard gain or something like that. And then we didn't really see much of that the rest of the game. And they were able to make enough plays when they needed it. But again, like that sort of effort's not going to get it done against the Chiefs because you're not holding the Chiefs to 16 points. I don't care how good you play on defense. That's not happening. You take a win. The Bengals right now, if we could tell them you're going to hold the Chiefs to 24, they sign up for that right now, immediately. And so if you're thinking I want to see some change to what this Bengals offense does, something where Burrow's getting the ball out a little bit quicker, where they're making use of all those athletes that they do have, of why they have built this foundation for themselves. They're probably a year ahead of schedule in terms of being in the AFC Championship game. And maybe if they don't win that game against the Chiefs a few weeks ago, right, then they're playing the Chiefs in the previous round, and that's a 4-1 game, and the 2-3 game is Titans and Bills, and maybe we're looking at that Bills-Chiefs AFC Championship game that I think a lot of us, myself included, think was really the AFC Championship game, regardless of the round it was played in. Would have expected the Bills to beat the Bengals if they would have been able to come out ahead, expect the Chiefs to beat the Bengals, but it should be a fun one, and I do think it stays within the number here at 7.5. Are you on that same page too? If this is ultimately what it's coming down to Sunday morning, would Bengals be your pick against the spread?
I'll make a pick on Thursday. Let me think about it. I really want to go watch that game again because I want to understand how. I mean, I know the Bengals had a lot of penalties. Like watching it live, I watched the whole game live. I know the Bengals had a lot of penalty luck, but I really want to go watch and see what they did to the Chiefs defense and if Joe Burrow's gonna be able to keep up with Patrick Mahomes. Because I think Patrick Mahomes has really matured this year. Remember the Chiefs were 3-4 to start the year. Yeah, and they were 16-1 to win the Super Bowl. So if you have a 16-1 Chiefs Super Bowl ticket, pat yourself on the back.
Yeah, what's that, plus 180 now?
Yeah, plus 180, less than 2-1. So you might as well just bet the money line and hedge against it. But it's like the Chiefs. I mean, he's learned a lot. He's matured a lot this year. He had a baby earlier in the year. I think that was distracting him. His brother on the TikTok has been a distraction. I think Patrick Mahomes had a lot of maturing to do this year after that 3-4 start, and you saw that yesterday. And the way he played that game, the way they came back and won the game is like he's made that step. So I don't think. No matter what the Bengals throw at him, I think he's going to be ready to score the points that the Chiefs need to win the game.
Should be a fun one. We'll check back in it later in the week. But right now, give them a lean toward the Bengals as long as they're getting the touchdown in this one. Let's talk about the NFC. As you said, this was a game we just saw 3 weeks ago, right? Week 18 of the regular season. 2 weeks ago? 2 weeks ago? 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, Rams and 49ers got together. The Rams got out to a 17-point lead. The 49ers then erased that lead, erased a touchdown deficit in the final 2 minutes, win the game in overtime. That got them into the playoffs. That knocked the Rams down from the 2 seed to the 4 seed. I mean, that was a game, DeWitt, that both of those teams desperately wanted. The 49ers, obviously, because if they lose that game, we're not even talking about them in this spot. We're not talking about them in the playoffs, period. We're talking about the New Orleans Saints as a playoff team this year. And so the 49ers come back, they get the win. The Rams no longer get to be the 2 seed. I mean, just think about that. What if, DeWitt? What if the Rams, they're up 17-0 at halftime? What if they just hold on, win that game? 49ers are out. The Saints are in. It's Rams versus Saints in the first round. It's Cowboys versus Cardinals in the first round. Like, how crazily different could this NFC bracket have looked had the Rams held on? They didn't, and now here we are once again, Rams and 49ers meeting for the third time this season. The Rams are 3.5-point favorites. 46.5 is the total on this one. I know the 49ers have been a thorn in this Rams team side for quite a while, basically the entirety of the Sean McVay era. But man, I think this is Rams. I like the Rams quite a bit in this one.
I mean, entertainment value-wise, I'm glad the 49ers made the playoffs because they've made it entertaining. Every game they've been has been entertaining. I'm still not sure how they won that game on Saturday.
That's what I'm saying.
I know how they won. It's just crazy that Aaron Rodgers the defense did. Aaron Rodgers didn't score anything after that first drive, and it's just crazy to me that.
Oh my God! I was watching that game with a friend, and when the Packers go up 7-0, I was like, the Packers are winning this game by 17. Like they just marched right downfield, a couple of big chunk plays to Devontae Adams, but like this is just not even going to be worth watching. Like we're going to be barely paying attention to the second half, and then we all know what happened from there.
Yeah, I think the Rams -3 in the first half is like an interesting spread here, just because I think if you think the Rams are going to come out and kind of take care of business, like that's a good lean. Is because mostly like the home teams in the playoffs, typically if they come out, they'll get a lead at halftime and then kind of finish the game out. Like that was the first time McVay's ever lost a halftime lead was that 49ers game where they had a 17-point lead. So I think I lean, if I'm going to make a bet like immediately, I'd say Rams -3 in the first half, just because I think it's an interesting, like if they're going to come out and dominate the game, I think they're going to win the first half pretty easily. And that's kind of where they're going to stake their dominance, especially, I mean, kind of how they did against the Bucs yesterday. They kind of had control of that game until they decided to, when the Rams offense is passing, that's when they're at their best.
Yeah.
When the Rams are trying to run the ball and trying to suddenly turn into a power football team for whatever reason, now, taking Sony Michel out of the game plan and like Akers getting most of the carries yesterday. It's like, they just need to like keep passing the ball because that's when they're going to make all. And Cooper Kupp's basically a wide receiver if he's running those little like short routes where he just gets open and it's like an RPO. He's like, okay, I'm going to find this little soft zone. I'm going to get a 3-yard catch and then I'm going to run for 5 more yards. It's like 8-yard run every single time. So, I mean, the Rams, the coaching matchup is fascinating. Like Shanahan, like I was kind of bashing him last week for a couple of his mistakes and, perfectly coached game on Saturday for what he had talent-wise, what the offense could do, what Jimmy G, like his, obviously he's having shoulder and thumb issues now. And then, but, the Rams just basically blew that game yesterday. They gave Tom Brady 9 lives, and I can't believe he didn't cash in on it. So.
I mean, I sat here on multiple episodes of the show last week and said, like, there's no way that the 49ers can beat the Packers if they don't get something out of Jimmy Garoppolo. And they got less than nothing out of Jimmy Garoppolo, and they win that game. I'm going to double down on that. Like, there's no way that if Jimmy G gives them the same sort of performance he gave against the Cowboys and he gave against the Packers, that they win this game against the Rams. You talk about 9 lives. Like, you just can't win consistently against top-level competition, which goes without saying you're facing in the playoffs with that sort of quarterback play. Like, I don't care what you have on the rest of your team. And let's be honest about the game against Packers. Defense played awesome. Defense played the best possible game that it could have played. And they still needed just dramatic special teams mistakes from the Packers to win that game, to stay within the number, frankly, because that was a game that the Packers, if you were on the Packers, you were on the right side of the spread for 54 minutes of game time, right? From the moment they scored that first touchdown until the moment the block punt touchdown happens. I mean, that covered basically the entire game, that you were just on the right side of the number. And then, you ultimately, not only do you lose your bet, but the Packers lose outright. And so, like, I still, like, remarkable for the 49ers to have gotten to this point, especially with the injuries they dealt with in the regular season, going all the way back to Raheem Mostert in week 1. I think it runs out here. The Rams are in this spot. Their offense has potentially never looked better in terms of everyone in the offense doing what they do and contributing in the way that you expect them to contribute. I feel like this should be one where the Rams, as long as we're talking about this being somewhere in like the 3.5 to 5 point range, I feel very comfortable with the Rams. I'd actually get a little worried if this game ticks down below 3, because then they're just begging you to bet on the Rams at that point.
I think this spread might come down a little bit, to be honest. I think there's a lot of smart people who've been back in the 49ers all year. Lots of big money coming in on the 49ers at the last minute, moving the spreads down at the last minute.
They're like the hipster pick, though. They're the cool side to be on. It's the cool kids at the lunch table who are picking the 49ers.
No, it is. And but the 49ers, like when you look at their advanced stats, they're great at everything except they don't have a quarterback.
Yeah. Oh my
and they
God.
Don't have
great.
I mean, they are. Like that's on Saturday. It was just all, and Debo's great too. Like Debo, I'm starting to think like Debo Samuel's top 5 player in the NFL, right?
And we'll see what the deal is with him, right? Coming off obviously got hurt late in the game against the Packers. He's got to play, but we'll see what sort of level he's playing at. But like that's sort of the point. You just made the point a little bit more concisely that I was trying to make, in that Like, this is the NFL in 2022. We all watched Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes last night. Can you beat one good team with Jimmy Garoppolo? Sure. Can you beat two good teams with Jimmy Garoppolo? Sure. Are you going to beat three good teams in a row, all on the road with that level of quarterback play? Eventually, that's going to route. Eventually, you need something from your quarterback. And we're not asking him to do what Patrick Mahomes did last night. We're asking him to go 250 yards, 7.5 yards per attempt, a touchdown, and no turnovers. Like, we're not asking him to suddenly turn into an MVP, but if he can't do that, I just can't see them again grinding their way to a run game and defense and special teams based victory against this Rams team.
No, I agree. But the Rams need to put the pedal on the gas and finish them off.
Yes.
Because if you don't finish them off, this team fully believes they will get back in this game somehow, whether it's a turnover or something else. And don't forget, the 49ers drafted Trey Lance and gave up a ton of capital that could have helped this team more to draft Trey Lance. Yep. And that says all you need to know about Jimmy G and what the staff actually thinks about him. Because remember, the 49ers would have a Super Bowl if he didn't miss the wide open wide receiver in the Super Bowl. So it is it's an interesting dynamic. I think it's great when we get these 3 times these teams play 2 or 3 times in a season. Like, there's so much strategy. Like, I'm gonna go back and watch some of the games this weekend just because of how much strategy there was between the coaches and the blunders, the mistakes, and the analytics and all that stuff. It was just I think we're gonna get some of that this weekend if these 2 teams can keep it close and make it interesting in the second half.
Yeah, 2 games ahead of us that hopefully can live up to what we saw in the divisional round, because that was an unbelievable weekend of football. And certainly Sean McVay's latent conservatism that has bitten the Rams previously in the past is going to be a topic of conversation as we get ready for conference championship weekend just 6 days from now. Andrew DeWitt, thanks for being with us here on Best on the Board, my friend.
All right, have a good one.
All right. NBA talk coming up next. First, though, a message from our friends at BetMGM, the presenting sponsor of Best on the Board. Bet 10, win 150, plus a free 3 months to The Athletic. Just go to BetMGM.com and use the code TheAthleticPod to take advantage of this offer from the king of sportsbooks. Again, that's Bet 10 to win 150. Any bet, doesn't matter what the odds are. You bet 10, you win 150, plus 3 free months to The Athletic at BetMGM.com with the code TheAthleticPod. It's a new customer offer for people at BetMGM. Terms and conditions apply. All right, NBA time. Tass Melas from No Dunks joining us. And Tass, we got a little bit of memo here that people can see if you're watching us on YouTube. It's like off-white gray hoodie day on Best on the Board.
Yeah, we're staying cozy this week, Michael. I'm not sure how it is in Chicago. I imagine it's cold.
Pretty cold.
We got hit with a little cold spell in the south. So everybody's doing it. Even on No Dunks, we're all just sweatering it up because we can't handle this cold anymore. We all came from the north, but now we're soft.
You thinned out that blood a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, hey, it's that cozy time of year. We're all feeling hot after what we watched over the weekend in the NFL, and now we're ready to talk about a 4-game slate, a much shorter slate than we're used to seeing on Mondays. Just 4 games available to us in the NBA. So let's get to it. 3-player props that you and I are going at here. Really quick, let me just look back to last week where you went 1-1, I went 0-1. So you're 15-10 on the season. I am 8-9. Again, these are records we can live with, certainly, especially you're 15-10 doing the heavy lifting for us. So we're going to get to a couple of props here, a trio of props from us for tonight's 4-game NBA slate. And the first 2 picks, your first pick, my only pick of the day, come to us from the same game. Bulls at Thunder. As of right now, the Bulls are 1.5-point favorites in this game. 216.5 is the total on it. But as I said, we're both looking at a couple of props. You start us off with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander.
SGA is going over 24.5 points tonight against the Bulls because they are thin at the guard position. Unfortunately, Alex Caruso is going to be out 6 to 8 weeks after that dastardly hit by Grayson Allen on Friday. Lonzo Ball is out for a couple months. And some people will say, Zach LaVine joined the Bulls on this road trip unexpectedly. Same with Javonte Green. Maybe they can slow down Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I don't like the idea of guys just coming back having to do both sides, work on both sides of the ball. Zach LaVine and Javonte Green are going to have to get going offensively. And so I don't think that bodes well against Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who is playing really, really well. He had 29 against a great Cavs team in his last game. In a game where they tried to focus on Shai because they took everybody else out as well. No one else scored more than 12, but Shai was able to get his. Shai's making his all-star push, and I think against this Bulls backcourt that is it's thin. Frankly, it's their best guard defenders. Both of them are out, and I would assume who's going to do some work out there on Shea, but Shea's just he is being pretty surgical most recently with his game, so I like him in this spot against the Bulls.
Two best perimeter defenders, as you said, out for the Bulls. And, right now, I mean, you and I are talking at, 12:30 my time, 1:30 your time. This game tips in about 6 hours. We're assuming that LaVine is going to be able to play. You haven't had anything officially from the Bulls.
Right.
They probably don't join him this early in the trip if they're not going to play. So it's a safe assumption to make. But as you said, the Bulls, it's hard to ask a guy to come back from the knee injury that LaVine's coming back from and immediately, boom, be right back in there playing his ass off on both sides of the ball. And the Bulls, 1-6 in their last 7 games. They need Zach scoring a little bit more than whatever he can offer on the defensive side. So I would expect to see a little bit more Ayo Dosunmu on SGA today. I like that play, and it plays into what I'm looking at. It's a TBD right now because of these guys coming back, or most likely coming back, LaVine and Javonte Green. No Bulls props posted as of yet. So I got a Kobe White TBD prop. Basically, whatever it ends up being, I'm going to be on the over, looking at both of his points and his threes. Again, we assume LaVine's coming back. If he comes back, he's going to have to carry a big offensive load. But can you just throw him right back in, especially in a game against a bad OKC team where the Bulls are still favored on the road? Are you really throwing him back in there at 35 minutes if you're Billy Donovan? I'm not so sure that that's the case. And Kobe White has already been playing a much larger role even before the perimeter injuries that the Bulls have suffered. Really, it's been basically the first Alex Caruso injury that opened up a larger door for Kobe White playing time. And he's been playing a primary scoring role off the bench for the Bulls. And now with LaVine and Lonzo having been out, it's been a primary scoring role in the starting lineup for the Bulls. And you just look back over his recent games, scored 22 against Orlando. He had the bad night against Milwaukee in that game where Caruso got injured 7, but then 16, 16, 19, 20, 16. The guy has been basically putting up a pretty comfortable 17, 18 points per night since taking on a slightly larger playing time role for this Bulls team. If LaVine comes back, I actually like this better task for Kobe White's props because the numbers are going to come down with LaVine being back in the fold here. And so regardless of what we see, I think Kobe White is still going to have a very large role to play for the Bulls on the offensive side of the ball. And so I'm going to go with his over points, over threes tonight against OKC.
There's no way he doesn't have a big role in this Bulls backcourt. He has been a very pleasant surprise since he's been thrown into a much larger role than anyone expected because of all these injuries. But he is playing himself into another contract. He's doing really, really well out there on both sides of the ball. So yeah, I think there's going to be some points to be had here in this game. There's going to be some points on the board. I'm not sure the over total in this game, but it feels right. It feels like what's the over total here, Michael?
216.5.
Yeah. Sometimes the Thunder struggle a little bit to put points on the board. They did against the Cavs, but against the Bulls team, that feels like an over too.
Yeah. I like that. That plays well for both of our plays if this one ends up going over 216.5. You mentioned the Cavs. Obviously, they're back on the floor tonight as well. They are playing against the New York Knicks, and unsurprisingly, a total much lower than we're used to seeing in most NBA games in this era. 202.5 is the total on this one. Cavs 6.5-point favorites at home against the Knicks. Evan Mobley is where you take us next. What do you got for us on the Cavs rookie big man?
Yeah, the Cavs 7.5-point favorites to start. Now 6.5-point favorites. Line coming down, I guess, because people are on the Knicks. I guess because it's a big name market. But this Cavs team is so good, and Evan Mobley is playing above his head all season long. He's not a rookie. He's a rook out there doing non-rookie things, and he just came off a 15-17 game. And I think he's just going to go on a heater from here on out. So I like the over of 26.5 points, rebounds, and assists for Evan Mobley. I think the ball is going to go through him. And for some guys, when they're achieving like the rookies, I should say, when they're achieving numbers like this, they come back to earth quite often. But again, this guy, absolutely not a rook. He had 26, 9, and 5 in his only game against the Knicks this season. And they have a great record, the Cavs do, as favorites this season. I mentioned that because I think Evan Mobley, again, doesn't feel like a rook. And as Evan Mobley goes, the Cavs do as well. And most teams with young players like this, if they're in the favorite spot, doesn't bode well. But I think the Cavs and Evan Mobley have a really great game against this Knicks team that are coming off a back-to-back, even though the Knicks are a pretty good paint defense team. They don't allow a lot of offensive rebounds, which doesn't bode well for the rebound number that Evan Mobley will eventually get, I think, in this game. He had 15 and 17 yesterday. 5 of those were offensive rebounds up his 17. But I think this number at 26.5 will be destroyed. I think Evan Mobley will surpass that pretty easily, even though this Tibbs team will play solid defense. Evan Mobley will have a nice little coming out party against the Knicks here. Just it's night in and night out with this guy. So it feels like a party every night, but he's just too good for words. He plays well beyond his years. I think this line is a little bit low when it comes to the points, rebounds, and assists.
Yeah, a guy who easily in other years could have been the number 1 overall pick in the draft after what he did at USC. Comes out in a year with Cade Cunningham, ultimately is the number 3 overall pick, but still a guy who was right there. It was a fun discussion, even though we pretty much always knew Cade was going to be the number 1 pick. A lot of people picking Oklahoma State to go to the Final Four last year based on what Cade Cunningham did, but it was a fun discussion leading into it. And plenty of other years, Evan Mobley could have easily been the number 1 guy and arguably has played like the number 1 guy so far this season.
Yeah, and it's interesting with general managers in the NBA because even though he was the number 3 pick in their annual survey before the season started, he was the guy projected to be the best player in 5 years, even over Cade, over any other Jalen in the draft. So so everybody knew it, but it's just come a little bit sooner, and you just can't bet against this guy. And I think that 15 and 17 line that he just came off of, it happens because the ball is in his hands a lot. So if you're betting on anybody to do anything in this league, it's a good idea to bet on the guy who has the ball in his hands, and he will have it in his hands against this Knicks team.
A guy who has been thrown right into the fire for Cleveland this season and has proved himself capable of handling that. We go Evan Mobley over 26.5 points, rebounds, and assists to wrap up our NBA talk and wrap up this episode of Best on the Board. For Taz Melas, Andrew DeWitt, I am Michael Beller. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Good luck. Happy betting. We'll talk to you soon.